Hello, hello, everybody, and welcome. I am your host, Liz, joining you as usual from Central Virginia and the unceded lands of the Monacan Nation. And I am so glad that you are here with me today. And hey, here is your reminder that my new book, Home to Her, Walking the Transformative Path of the Sacred Feminine, is now available for pre-order from Womancraft Publishing. Wahoo! This book is my love letter. Thank you. This book is my love letter to the sacred feminine and all that she's taught me. I'm so excited. Honestly, still a little in shock that she's almost out in the world. You can pre-order from womancraftpublishing.com. And if you order before, I think it's September 22nd, 2022, you can get access to some fun freebies that include a recorded Great Mother meditation, which is based on my own practice. And then you'll also get an invitation to join me and Womancraft founder Lucy Pierce, who will be turning the tables and interviewing me about writing this book and what are some of the insights I've gotten from hosting this podcast. And we'll be taking your questions too. Fun, fun, fun. So I will put all of this in the show notes. And now let's be on with it, shall we? All right. So something I've wanted to do for some time is have an author join me who is exploring the world of the sacred feminine from the realm of fiction. And I'm excited that my guest today has done exactly that. I love her new book for so many reasons. First, because it's just a lovely story, but also because it provides a beautiful imagining of what a life gently and purposefully steered by sacred feminine wisdom can actually look like right here and now in our modern times and in the world today, which I think honestly is something that we need so much more of. So let me go ahead and introduce her to you. Elizabeth Gould is the author of the new book, The Well of Truth, which incorporates elements of fantasy, mysticism, and lore to follow a female heroine through poignant moments of her adult life. Through the initiations of marriage, raising children, getting divorced, going through menopause, losing loved ones, and ultimately making an independent life for herself, she gains insight and spiritual wisdom from unexpected places. Elsbeth received a BA in art history from Stanford University and worked for several years in the old master's art world in New York City before getting a master's in education from Syracuse University in New York. That's right, Elsbeth SUNY?
State University of New York.
How dare I say Syracuse? Forgive me, SUNY people. You can clearly tell that I don't know anything about my New York universities. That's so funny. I saw the initials and I was like, well, that's Syracuse, obviously. All right. So she got her master's degree from SUNY. And as an elementary school teacher, she found her passion in mentoring girls at puberty and working with their families to better understand this important rite of passage. For many years, she was the director of a nonprofit dedicated to positive menstrual and menopausal education and awareness. It is her joy to help women and girls understand and appreciate the intelligence of the female body and its connection to the cycles of the natural world. The themes in The Well of Truth grew out of Elspeth's experiences as a mother, teacher, and menstrual advocate. And the stories incorporate her love of art, travel, mythology, goddess traditions, trees, and the moon. Although she's a California native, Elspeth feels most at home in Aotearoa, or New Zealand, where she currently lives and where she is joining us from today. Elspeth, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here with you, Liz. Oh,
Yeah, SUNY.
okay.
Okay. It was like a rookie podcaster move. I'm supposed to do a little bit of more research. I was like, no, I know this. I'm like, no, I don't know this clearly.
I wouldn't have minded Syracuse. That would have been cool too. Uh,
Oh my goodness. All right. Well, I usually start with most people getting a sense of their spiritual background. And part of it's just because I'm curious. And also part of it is because I find that um, it just seems to be a rare person whose spiritual path started them off on the right way. So I like to hear, kind of the evolution. So I wonder if you could just tell me a bit about
sure.
your own spiritual background, what that was like growing
Okay.
up.
Great. So I grew up in a very devout Catholic family,
Okay.
a large family, and I will say, although I'm not a practicing Catholic now, I did receive the gifts of learning about devotion
Mm.
and reverence. And, my mom had a May shrine in our home for the month of May, which was uh, like a shrine to Mary.
Mm.
And we'd, she always had fresh flowers and we'd say our devotions to Mary. So um, that was for me a very strong connection with the divine feminine in the form of Mother Mary, and even though as I when I grew up and went off to university, I felt the limitations of that tradition that I had been brought up in. I it kind of spurred me forward to discover other cultures and that had perhaps a feminine component to them. And when I was in my early 20s, did a year backpacking through Asia and studying Taoism and Buddhism and Hinduism. And for me, that was really quite eye-opening to see all the different aspects and qualities of the feminine in spiritual traditions. So that would just kind of piqued my interest, and then I went off later to kind of continued self-study um, and read all of the Women Who Run with Wolves and all of the Jean Shinoda Bolin books about goddesses, and I just loved more and more finding out about these traditions that exist all around the world.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, and I was going to ask you, this is my next question, I guess, was there, well, did you know Mary as the divine feminine at that time? Did you kind of recognize her as such when you were younger? Or was that understanding of this concept of the divine feminine, is that something that showed up later?
Uh, I would say conceptually it showed up later.
Mm-hmm.
Um, one of the things that's kind of fun and mystical about Catholicism is that you pray to different saints for different things,
Yeah.
or for different qualities. So that there's Bridget, there's um, Saint Barbara. There's so many different Saint Elizabeth. There's all a whole variety of them, and but Mary is like she's just the mom who holds it all. And so I always felt connected to her, but I didn't consciously say like, oh, she's the feminine face of God.
Mm-hmm.
That came later. But I just knew that I had a connection to her, and
Yeah.
that she was she healed, and she was unconditional and loving, and so all of those qualities that she had, I internalized.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And was there a particular point that you feel like you became aware of this idea of the divine feminine, or was it more just like a gradual understanding, or how did that kind of play out for you?
Hmm. Oddly enough, I would say that the more that I connected to the natural world is when I started to see that feminine aspect in everything.
Mm.
So I grew up, cities, with not a lot of kind of wild spaces. So I can relate to the experience that Grace had in the first chapter of The Well of Truth, where she's all of a sudden in this place where she can see this wide vista, and there's no roads and there's no cars and there's no cell towers, and all of a sudden she's just aware of the natural elements. And so for me, connecting to the divine feminine was intricately linked to the way I felt myself as part of the natural world. And I couldn't give you an exact date or time, but that's how it evolved for me.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think that mirrors what I've heard from a lot of other guests here, that it was there's this intertwining of those two ideas, or that yes, that it was sort of the earth as, and I don't even know if they would all say that earth is mother or whatever, but the earth is sort of, that relationship with the earth is the opening towards understanding this feminine presence. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
For you, would you say that was
I w-
how?
yes, I would say I would say that that the woods always felt more like church to me than church. Um, that I'd never really had spiritual experiences inside a church. Not really. But I would feel that sense of wonder and awe out in the world. And then I would say that sort of my awakening to divine feminine wisdom almost just went on track with the natural world. Like they fueled each other. Like the more I learned
Mm,
about the sacred feminine, the more I wanted to be out in nature. And the
right.
more I was in nature, the more I
Exactly.
felt her presence. And like they've kind of gone together. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I was going to
Mm.
ask you too, like, um, I've kind of taken to asking guests as well, like if this language works for you. Sacred feminine is it's the language I use, and I also understand it doesn't work for everybody. But is this like who or what is the divine feminine, sacred feminine to you now? And if you wouldn't use, and I know that's like right, how do you put words around such a large idea? But and also if you wouldn't use that language, like what might you use instead?
Mm. Mm. that's that's a big
It
question.
is,
Um,
isn't it?
I, ultimately, it's beyond gender.
Right.
It's, um, I mean, I just think of like the energy that is all inclusive, loving, holding, protecting, creative, beautiful. Uh, for some people, that can be the divine masculine as well. So it's whatever is that which is sustaining, nurturing, revivifying, all of those things that uh, augment and support life.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Mm.
I don't know if that answers your question, but it just keeps getting bigger and bigger. But for our purposes of human to human, trying to understand some very specific aspects of life and how, for instance, my experience as a woman who gave birth, I have a particular set of experiences that the father of my children might not necessarily have.
Right.
That, so it's everything is linked and connected, um, and it feels like that more of the masculine principles are what are so extant in our culture
Yeah.
that the more nurturing, compassionate, holding features of the feminine feel like they have to be brought in, or
Yeah.
just to kind of make the playing field level.
Yes.
You know,
Yes, I do. I know exactly what you mean. And I've been thinking about that a lot lately too. This idea of balancing, like a balancing of energies. And because I know for me, like it's in hosting the show and talking about the sacred feminine, I'm not necessarily imagining some like reversed world in which there is, it's not like let's keep the structure, but just throw goddess at the top and it's all good. Like it is something
right?
about like an absence that it, well, she's not really absent, but like a longing, like an aching for something that we are clearly
Yes,
missing
yes.
and answering that longing. Yeah.
Yes, I once read a quote by Mary Wollstonecraft
Oh
that,
yeah.
and she said, women don't want power over men; they just want power over themselves.
Yes.
And I thought, well, that's kind of the picture that um, that it shouldn't be. Okay, you guys have been in charge for a while now. We're taking over. Like, no, there needs to be something that's neither nor, that's more inclu- inclusive of the skills and the gifts and the qualities of all the various aspects of who we are.
Hmm. Yeah. I'm like, oh gosh, I don't know if I feel inspired or depressed that a bit that Mary Wollstonecraft was talking about this, and she was, hundreds of years ago. But I guess it
Yeah,
would make sense that women knew even then that there was something severely out of whack, and she just
yes,
had the privilege of access to education and a pen to
yep.
express it. Yeah. Yeah. Well,
Mm.
I want to ask you about your book, Well of Truth,
Okay,
and congratulations. I know it's your first book,
thank
right?
you.
So,
Yes,
yes. So tell me about how it came to be, and
okay.
what the story's about, and how the sacred feminine kind of weaves her magic into this book.
Okay. Well, I since I was a little girl, I loved keeping a journal, and probably because I had four brothers at home, and I just needed some place that was for me. So I like to write, and to this day, if I can have a moment to sit down with a cup of tea and a journal, like to me, that's a good time. That's
Mm-hmm.
like a sacred refuge, just journal time. And so the stories really came out of journal writings. Um, it's a loosely autobiographical book, but there were some, very poignant, significant moments in my life I that when I had my kids were little, and I thought, oh my God, I need some kind of creative outlet, other than changing diapers all the time and feeding and washing clothes. I think I'm just gonna write some short stories. And so I just took one at a time, and I would just take a kernel of something from my journal, and then I would work on it. And because I had no deadlines or no goals, they just kind of blossomed in their own time. And when I had about six stories that I liked, I shared them with a friend, and she said, "Oh, they're really good stories. You should, think of publishing them, and or keep going, and ultimately publish them." So I thought, well, maybe, but it was never really something that I thought was going to happen. And then just over the years, I added more and more stories, and then the more I worked on it, the more it became like a project that I could hold on to. That like, oh, this is this thing I'm doing, and it enriches my creative and spiritual life to be doing this, and I can have, like I said, a kernel of story, but then I can change it. And so it was, for me, it was very cathartic to be able to look at some, like a story that was maybe difficult, like going through divorce or losing a friend, and then imagining it from a different context, and that the wisdom of a mythological character, of a goddess, could meet me and share something, with my soul. And so it became this conversation that appears to be between myself and this other being outside myself, until she gets, starts to understand that it's all in her anyways.
Mm-hmm.
All of this lives in her, and hopefully for the reader of the book, that you can see, yes, this is, my story is your story, and your story is uh, you know guided by all of the wisdom that lives inside of you.
Mm-hmm.
And to have the um, encouragement to go to look inside and to find them. And we can do whatever we want with the stories. We don't have to be victims of our stories. We can be the heroines of our stories.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's kind of how it, you know came together, as far as like the actual work, and then my inner process of meeting these elements of myself, or of the main character of the story.
Yes. Oh, I love that. Well, and so Grace, right?
Yes.
She It was kind of fun to read because each chapter is sort of they're linked together, but they're also kind of standalone in a way. You know, they're sort of like short stories that are woven into a narrative of her life, right? And it's sort of fun as
Right,
you're reading it to see like, I wonder who's going to show up to her. So each one, you know, so there's
right.
there's sort of this divine guidance that shows up to be with her in both large and small moments throughout her life. And I'm curious how those divine forces, whether that was like, you know, this fabulous tree goddess that just shows up at her wedding, or, you know, to whichever ones that appear, you know, like how was that kind of an organic thing, or did they sort of reveal themselves to you slowly over time as well? Or how did those stories weave their
Mm,
way into it?
mm. First, I want to say good pickup that the stories are kind of standalone because that's really what they were, and
Mm,
then woven together. Originally, I thought that maybe it would be like a little book of meditations where you could just open to a story and you didn't have to read the other ones, you know, sequentially.
mm,
Um, but the when I start a story, I didn't know who was going to show up,
mm,
and you know, pretty clearly who wanted to show up made themselves known. So I was as much in the unknowing as well. Like, okay, well, there's a story, and it starts off, and she's doing this, and then, uh, and I walk my dog, but I often would take the story with me on my morning walk and just kind of hold it loosely, and there always something would come in that would give me another breadcrumb to, oh, okay, all right, well, she's going to do this, I don't know, okay, and then it would start to make sense over time. But sometimes things would come in my dreams, and I'd be
mm,
like, oh, it's Kali who's going to be in this story, or you
mhm,
know, there were all these different ways of receiving the information,
mhm.
and or reading a book and like, oh, what is that? So so it was a pretty organic process, I'll say.
Okay. Well, and I wonder if this is maybe not the like, is this a good question to ask an author? If, like, did you have favorite goddesses that showed up, or is that playing favorites? I don't know. Are there any of them, you know?
Well, if a lightning bolt strikes me right now,
Uh,
then you'll know the answer. You know, I to be honest, I felt that the goddess that showed up in the beginning of the book, the tree goddess,
mhm,
she was the patron saint of the project, and she made herself known to me in many different ways. She she showed up and gave me her name, and I didn't know what what that was. And then I went and did some research. I'm like, oh yeah, Etain, who in Gaelic would be Edine, but she's the goddess of shape shifting and wells and trees and uh, beauty and love. She's tremendous, and I didn't know her before, but I've gotten to know her through this project.
yes, and that was a name that wasn't familiar to me either. So
Mm.
I loved that. Um, yeah. Oh, sorry, I thought you were going to say something else. No.
Oh, I was gonna say, but everybody, every character that showed up in the book, I I love them in their own um, this the skills and the qualities that they bring are so magnificent. They're different. I really who showed up that I wasn't expecting was the Green Man. He made
Yes.
I wasn't expecting him because I thought, oh, we were sort of going on the trend of goddess, and then the Green Man shows up, and I'm like, high five, dude! I'm so happy you're here. You know, he really wanted to be a part of it.
Oh, I love that. Well, and now I want to ask you too. Just for the listeners, I know Elspeth and I have been on the same priestess path. So I've had Ariel Spilsbury, who's the founder of the Sanctuary of the Open Heart and the 13 Moon Mystery School, on the show. I've had one of my sisters Lisa Grace, who was on, I think back in 20, I don't know, maybe 2021 last year. But Elspeth has also walked that path as well. And so I don't know, mentioning the green man made me think of this. I don't know how that sort of your own priestess path, has that kind of lined up with the writing of the book, and did that influence any of it? Or did those things kind of intertwine together, or how did that play out?
You know, the priestess path and the work with Ariel has been for me such a formative
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
Um, for so many years, as a younger woman, I really and truly longed to be in the company of others who were holding that kind of archetypal space and awareness and that expanded way of looking at the world we live in. And I loved the fact that it was very esoteric and also very practical, and
Hmm.
that these energies from all of these different traditions, you can feel them. They are real. It's not just something that people talk about.
Yes.
It's it's an embodied thing, and uh, and working with the 13 Moon Mystery School has been very much a practicing and a remembering of this knowledge and this experience that is timeless. And
Mhm.
so I would definitely say that my book is anchored in that embodied awareness of how these divine archetypes work and live in us. And I wanted it to be that. I wanted to be a woman who was going through very real experiences, and how do you bridge to this other realm? It's not so hard. It's not so far away. It's here with us and
Yes.
available all the time.
Yes. And I think that was one of my favorite things about the book, was that it could feel well, and for me, and I'd be curious if you had the same experience, but for example, so part of doing the 13 Moon Mystery School priestess initiation is you spend a significant amount of time in temple, and that is really, oh, such valuable time, but it is also time out of time. Like you are very, you have stepped in between worlds, as they would say, right? Like, and so and then you re-enter. When I did it, my kids were little. I mean, they were, I think, 3 and 6, so
Yeah,
there was that it wasn't a disconnect, but there was always the question of how do I fuse and blend these things together, because what you're experiencing in the temple is this beautiful sacred time, and we just don't
right.
live in a world that operates in that way. And so this is one of my favorite things about the book, is it felt very modern, very current. She's experiencing all
Mm-hmm.
these things, like bratty teenagers, and social media, and like this and that, and yet there's this divine feminine that's woven into it,
Mm-hmm.
which is like,
Right,
I think whether or not you intended it that way, it felt very instructional, or
right.
just like what you said, that it can be done, like you can
It can't.
weave these things together.
Right, and for the listeners, that whether or not you've experienced something like that, being in a temple of timelessness, anytime you go on a retreat or a
Hmm.
weekend away where you feel that um, you get a more expanded um, vision of your life, or just a nurturing space to come back to uh, the dripping faucet, and the car that's not working, and the kids. It can be really hard, and I think that's probably one of the biggest struggles, is merging the three-dimensional realm with the spiritual and the soul realm. And sometimes I get it, sometimes I don't, and it's
Yes.
all okay. We're constantly finding that our path between these different ways of being.
Yes, and I guess one other thing I loved about the book too is that Grace, because of who she is, it seems like she's not really seeking this stuff out. It's just coming to
Right.
her. And
Right.
so I felt that that was a powerful message too, right? That the idea of surrender, like it's already here. Like
Yes.
even if we live in a world that doesn't seem to orient itself to the sacred in any way, that doesn't mean it's not here.
That's right. And I would actually issue a kind of challenge to
Yeah.
everyone, which I see it for myself that the world is constantly giving messages, but it's a matter of me being open to listen. Uh, I'll give you an example. A good friend of mine passed away, and it was the date of uh, his death date, and I was on the freeway sitting in traffic, and I was thinking about him, and I looked at the truck right in front of me, and it said "Hi from JJ," and that was his name, and I was like, how could that be written on the back of a
Yes.
truck? And I'm sitting here stuck in traffic. I can't see anything else in front of me except that sign.
Mm.
And so
Mm.
I guess sometimes I think that those who are no longer in bodies, that they can't reach out to us in exactly the same way. So they maybe have to use other things that are available in our sphere to reach us. Um, but anyways, I would issue this challenge of like, if you just slow it down a little bit, not rushing around so much, and just kind of look around, you might notice things that like, wow, why do I keep seeing pictures of lions everywhere? Or what does this mean? And then you get kind of curious, like, oh, why does this keep happening? Or why do I keep noticing it's 3:33, and every time I looked at the clock it's 3:33. So there's all these like little things that are like a treasure hunt. At
Mhm.
least that's how I like to look at it. It keeps me engaged with the non-linear aspects of this experience, the magical.
Mhm.
Do you have experiences like that?
Well, yes, and I was also gonna say, like, it makes life more fun, doesn't it?
Oh,
I
heck
mean,
yeah. Because fun, we need fun. It's pretty heavy out there,
yeah,
So the ways that we can enliven and enrich, just bring the joy, bring the sparkle. It's
yes,
good, really good.
yes, yes. I was thinking of what there was a guest that was on, I don't know, um, a few months ago, Molly Reamer. She's the founder of Bridget's Grove. They make these wonderful little
Oh,
goddesses, um, and she's also a writer too. She wrote a book about a journey that she did, almost year-long journey with the goddess Persephone. But she
oh
talks,
wow.
yeah, it was really wonderful. But she she talks a lot about everyday magic and like just the idea of why not believe in it? Like it's more fun to to make your life a treasure hunt than not, right? Like
Exactly.
so if the lions and the 333 are showing up randomly, so what? Like
Yeah, that's cool. And then
yeah,
and then you can make a story or a conversation. You can create whatever you want
yeah,
with it.
yeah,
And
totally.
I don't know if you ever read Rob Bresney's books about the universe conspiring to help you. The whole idea of that, like the world wants you to succeed. So there are always these things that are available, and all that's really being asked of us is to express gratitude and to marvel and to feel the joy. And that's the gateway into all manner of possibilities.
Yes, yes, I love that. I'm familiar with his newsletter, I think, and I know because
Oh,
Ariel
yeah.
has mentioned it several times too.
Yeah.
And for those of you that don't know what we're talking about, I'm going to put all this in the show notes, so not to worry.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, I guess Another thing I wanted to ask you about is just the nice one of the things that I really liked about the book is so you're following this journey through Grace's life, and there's a very seasonal, cyclical feel to it, right? Like this respect of cycles, and that everything kind of has a rhythm and a flow, um, and that nothing is staying the same. And I'm,
Right,
which you actually start the book with this beautiful poem called Change
right.
that yeah, I just loved. But I wonder if you could speak to that idea of the wisdom of cycles, because I would also imagine that that played into your work as an educator around, menstruation as well, and
Right.
menopause. So I wonder if you could speak to that idea
Okay. Whew. This is
a bit.
my favorite subject.
Oh,
So
good.
I'm gonna just rein me in. Uh, it feels to me that the one lesson that is good to know as a human on this journey is that change is inevitable. Like that is the nature of our lives on earth, in nature, in ourselves. And so things are always changing. And the less I can resist it, the more that I can feel it and acknowledge, the good times, the bad times, um, the changing of seasons, then I can be more flexible and live more in harmony with everything because I'm not trying to make something happen or not happen. Um, and truly, my work with menstrual and menopausal advocacy really centered about that. Like our the female biological body is, it's like 4 seasons in a month. Like it's illustrating all of these things that are happening in the outside world, and the trick is to get in alignment to know, like, okay, this is my springtime, when I'm pre-ovulation, and then when I ovulate, this like summertime, and it's like a psycho-spiritual connection with the physical body. And then when we bleed, that's it's like the depth of winter, and to just let ourselves feel that. So that I it seems that there's so much wisdom that we can learn from the way our bodies work, and then watching that, if you're aligned with the cycles of the of the natural world, and get yourself there, then it just it just makes everything that much more uh, magnificent, because you're feeling yourself part of the bigger picture, and it makes it possible for intuition to flow more fully, and awareness and compassion and love. It just opens up all the channels. So uh, change change and flow, liquid movement seems to be the the overriding story. Everything is in flow all the time.
Do you feel that as someone who, well, and you shared this with me before, so that someone who's already moved through menopause now, like, does that change, do you feel like, once you are on the other side of menopause? Do you feel like because there's that obvious, like, constant
Right.
cycle growing of,
Yes.
like, I'm ovulating, I'm bleeding, I'm going through this over and over again, that stops, but do you feel that cyclical nature still, or do you feel it in a different way? What is that like?
That is $1 million question, because when you're in the cycle,
Yeah.
you know it very well. But then when you don't have it, it's like taking the training wheels off, where once again you become the cycle. It lives in you, but you don't have those markers, the same kind of markers that you would have had. Oh, I'm premenstrual, or oh, I'm ovulating. So I often find now that I need to really connect with the moon phases to keep, just to kind of help remind me.
Yes.
because because it's not the same. And a couple of friends and I are working on doing some collecting anecdotal stories from women who are beyond their cycling years to see like what part of that, like, are you do you still feel that you're um, working off this invisible cycle, and what part of it is that you're just tuned into everything that's happening. I don't know.
Mm.
So yeah, that's something that I'm really curious about, and we'll see what happens, because it, we live in this world where there's electricity, and we're inside and may not feel the full force of the elemental changes, and so you have to work a little more to make that connection.
Yes, yes. And I was also thinking too, but I do wonder if in some ways, um, I don't know. Applause to the women to me that are rare who cycle with the moon. I don't know. Like I think it's a beautiful. It's never happened for me personally. Like I think that's great if it works in your life that way. But if that doesn't happen for you, then you're sort of watching your own cycle, and then you're watching like the cycle of the moon, and then you're watching like the cycle of the seasons, and they can almost feel they're not competing with each other, but like they're not necessarily in sync. And
Right,
so you're like, okay, like it's a full moon, but I'm bleeding. Like, how does this feel? Like what's happening with me
right,
energetically right now? And which one is which? And so I could almost see in a way, if that was your experience and you're no longer in the cyclical nature of like your own cycle, if you're able to tune in a little bit more easily to the natural world, or to
right,
feel yourself in sync with the natural world.
right. Okay, so I just want to say this. That there are people that talk about, oh, how it was back in the day when all the women bled together
Yes.
at the new moon, and we were all so connected, and the world was blah blah blah. Great, love it. But you know what, we don't need to heap more shame on ourselves because we're not doing it the right way. That, oh,
Yeah.
I'm bleeding at the full moon. It's, to me, that feels so unhelpful.
Yeah.
That you bleed when you bleed. It's a normal, natural, healthy part of your life experience. And, um, they do say that women either have their cycles at one pole or another. So it's either full or new, not so much on the quarter moons, but it's at one pole or another. And so much of that is tied into the our lifestyles are so different. um the modern lifestyle, and it doesn't really, I don't think it really matters why. All that matters is that you're connecting with your body.
Mm-hmm.
That's all that matters. All the other stuff just makes you feel bad about yourself.
Yeah, such a good point too. Um, right, and I'm remembering too reading something about light pollution, how that changes our connection to the moon.
Yeah,
And most of us are in pretty well lit areas. We're not
yeah. Oh, and even, I'm here in a place where you can get dark skies, and you see the Starlink going across the sky, and there's all tons of satellites, and that's different. And I think it kind of comes down to that myth of purity. Like, we all want to, like, have everything in its, like, very best way, and that's just really not possible at this point in time. We do the best we can. We 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 try to hold a space that's as clear and cohesive and coherent as possible, but mm, I don't think it helps us to be chasing unrealistic or unattainable things.
Yeah.
How do you feel about that? That's just my take because I'm on the fun train. I'd rather have rather have fun than trying to be perfect, you
Well,
know?
I like the fun train, and I find that perspective really comforting, and it's kind of coming back for me to, what you wrote in the book and how, again, how relatable Grace is, and how real her life is, and that this divine presence is still there. I think I know for me, there's been a tendency to romanticize, and I catch myself doing it, but romanticize what the past might have been like, the far back past, which I mean, how the hell do we really know? Honestly, we don't know. We're all guessing.
Right.
We can imagine, and certainly there's evidence that there is more egalitarian society. We don't know what kind of diseases were around. We don't know how long people were living. And also, humans were still humans. We still had the same drama, like whatever, right? And we're not going backwards. We
Right.
cannot go backwards. We exist in this plane, in this reality right now. So that has been an open inquiry for me just in my own life every day, especially raising
Mm.
two small kids and like trying to
Right.
keep all this going is like, how do we keep the sacred here? How do we presence it here right now with what we have? Because,
That's right.
yeah,
That's the one that's the one question, you know, I can't say like, oh, I wish it was like this or because it's not that. Like, let's be real. This is what we've got, and so what are you gonna do with that?
yeah,
That's where we get to be creative, truly creative. Um, and we can't compare with other people and what it seems like their experiences. We just have our own, and it's on me to find the magic, but it's not on me to put myself down or be um, hard on myself because I'm not doing enough.
hmm,
I'm not spiritual enough. I didn't do all of this other stuff. Do what you can. You do what you can, and be kind to yourself.
yeah,
Just be kind. And some days are better than others.
yeah,
Big whoop. The sun comes up the next day. Thank the
yes,
goddess,
I
and we
know,
start
right?
again.
Yes. Well, and I guess as you're talking, I was thinking too, and again, thinking back to Grace in the book and her experiences and how, um, if we take the path of fun and um, so we can say, for example, that we live in a very patriarchal society, and this is a true statement. And yet we can also say that ain't no way you keeping the goddess down, right? This is also a true statement. She doesn't
Yeah,
go anywhere. Like, she's never
right.
gone anywhere. She is here. So, perhaps it's the fun becomes like, where is she in this very patriarchal society? Like, where am I going to
Exactly.
see her today?
That's it. That's it. Where you're open to finding it and looking actively looking around, and you'll be surprised. You'll be so delighted. It's like a little personal treasure hunt, but she's there.
Yeah.
I'm laughing because last night I went out to dinner with my daughter, and we were at this little restaurant, and the little salt holder on the table had a like a Virgin Mary like little spoon in
Gosh.
it. I'm like, what are you doing here?
Oh,
And
I
I
love
just thought
that.
it was so cute, and I don't know, that just made me think of like, oh yeah, you'll find these little things, and not just tchotchkes, but uh, you will find her presence everywhere.
Yes. You're reminding me so long ago, like early on this journey, which has been very mystical for me, lots of mysticism and things that I couldn't explain, but I was kind of trying all these things out, and I had done this guided meditation, which was one of the first times I'd ever done a guided meditation, to like go
Mm,
and seek something from a guide. And
right.
um, I ended up meeting an angel in this meditation, and this angel gave me a heart-shaped key. And I remember the time I was like, Oh my God, this is so cliche. It's an angel with a heart-shaped key. I cannot believe this
Oh,
is what my subconscious has produced. And I was like, well, that's ridiculous. And I sort of set it aside. And then I think it was like a week or two later, I was still in my corporate job, my corporate life, and I had gone to New York for a meeting with my team, and we had gone out to dinner, and our waitress shows up, and she's wearing these tiny little earrings with the heart-shaped keys on them, and I was like, "Oh, this is the friend," because I mean, this is not a symbol that showed up in my life very often.
right,
I was a very
right,
practical person. I don't mess around with heart-shaped keys. That's just silly stuff.
right.
And so I do remember being
Wow.
like, oh, what's going on here? It was quite wonderful.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And that's the path. And you
Yes.
can't really plan it out and like, okay, I'm gonna go find this. It, these things come to you when when you have this attitude of openness
Yeah.
to I want to meet the world in this way.
Mm-hmm.
Have a conversation,
Mm-hmm.
and then like home to her. You become
Yeah.
that home,
Yeah.
that place where she's always coming.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I love the way you said that. That's beautiful. Mm-hmm. I know. I want to take a little bit more of your time if that's okay, because I want to ask you
Yeah,
just
sure.
a little bit more about um, your work as a advocate around the idea of menstruation. And I'm curious, I'm asking, as a mother of still young children, who, one of whom will be going through that at some point, but hasn't yet. But I'm curious in your work in that area, how do I want to say this? I want to say, like, what were your biggest learnings, or what were some of the stumbling blocks that you sort of encountered that you saw that were challenging for people in really embracing this? Like, does that any kind of wisdom around that?
Yes, yes. Well, let's just say, no matter how empowered women feel, it is still such a taboo. It's changing a lot, but it's a deeply held taboo to either talk about the menstrual cycle, um, to have a positive attitude about
Yeah.
it. All of these things. Um, I'll just tell you a quick anecdote. I was at an International Women's Day conference several years ago as part of this nonprofit, and so we're giving out information and talking to people, and this older woman came up, very well dressed, very elegant. She came up and she just said, "It's disgraceful what you're doing. How dare you talk about these things that are unmentionable and horrible? Why would you waste your time?" And I was shocked.
Hmm.
And then then she went on, and I just looking at her face, I she had so much pain.
Mm.
She was holding so much pain around this, and I wasn't going to be able to change her mind in that moment, but she in some way embodied this deep voice um, that we have kind of many women have kind of inside
Yeah.
about, oh, this is you just don't feel good, and this is, and certainly many religions
Yeah.
keep that idea going, and so one of the things that I feel is important is for women to see how their cycles are um, important, but how they can work for them, like cycling awareness, like the I don't know if you've read any books by Miranda Gray. She's phenomenal. She wrote a book called The Optimized Women, and it's the idea is that when you are kind of ovulating, like that's when you're in your alignment of like physical and spiritual power, and so she gives practices like you know this is a good time for asking for a raise, or like making things happen, whereas when you're premenstrual, that's the time of like kind of clo- finishing up projects and tidying things up and putting things away so that you can have this space to go inward
Mm.
for a couple of days to attend to yourself. And so there's this kind of energetic cycling that we do, but I don't think very many young women or women know about it.
Yeah.
That's actually like our power center that we can work with, and so I think the thing for me when I was working with girls and hearing their stories of the first time they bled, and to have them say like, "Oh, I thought I was dying," or like I had to hide it, or like I never told my mom, and but
Mm.
I think it doesn't have to be that way. We can we can change it, but once again, we can't look back and the old days and say, okay, we're all going to go into the hut for a week.
Right.
Um, I, Another anecdote. My older daughter, who's very practical, when and I had all these books and things around the house, and you have your first moon. We're going to do this, and she walked in the room. Well, I was on the phone, and she just walked in the room and walked through the room and said, "I just started my period." And then walked out, and I'm on the phone. I'm like, what? And she's like, and I don't want, I don't want any drums. I don't want any TVs. I don't want any of this. Like, I just want to go out and have, a nice dinner. I said, fine, that's what we'll do.
Oh
So,
my gosh.
it was just very funny. Um, but our, especially for you as a mother of a girl, that you have the opportunity to create something, and you can create it with the other women in your community, should you choose, or you can just do it on your own. It's um, part of rediscovering,
Yeah.
the way of honoring the feminine.
Hmm.
There's really no rules.
Yes, I was going to say too. I feel like this relates back to everything we've been talking about, and just kind of finding the sacred in the ordinary and where we are now. Is that I've been reflecting on this idea lately that I feel like in some ways we are very much in a moment in time, in a generation, and I'm speaking a lot of like, uh, you know, white American culture too, where we don't have like the spiritual roots, like we sort of lost it, like they're upended, and that's sad in some ways. And it also is in a tremendous playground, a tremendous playground to figure out
Right,
and to just throw stuff at the wall and see if it's going to work.
right,
And
right.
and that goes to like creating ritual and the ways in which we bring sacred into the world, and just maybe, I guess, and I'm offering this to myself as well as anybody else who needs to hear it. The flexibility to know like there is no getting it right. There's no way that it was. We can't really look at something like it was done this way, so we should be doing it this way. We don't
Right,
have that. And
right.
so while that might give us guidance, we also have opportunity. So
Yes, and absolutely. And the thing is, keep it simple.
yeah.
Like, you know, it doesn't have to be this whole complex, complicated thing. It it's basically a way of bringing like the mind and the spirit into this recognition of change or transition of some way of honoring. And so simple sometimes is the very best way to do it.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. We were chatting about this before we started recording too, that, again, like, doing it simply, even if we don't know what our ancestors were doing, they probably were doing it simply because they didn't have the internet to order everything. They couldn't look up like
Right.
55 million different rituals you could do and a whole smorgasbord of spiritual practices and all these different tools and crystals you could order from all over the world. They couldn't do any of that.
That's right. That's right.
So,
Right. But
yeah.
it came from the heart.
Yeah.
Whatever, you know, words from the heart, spontaneous actions. These things are, that's our toolkit that we have inside of us,
Yeah.
of our creative life. Yeah.
Mhm.
So go have fun with that,
Mhm.
make it
Um,
your own.
yes, I love that, and that feels like a perfect place to stop. Go have fun and make it your own, people. This is this is our learning from this particular podcast episode.
Right. Excellent.
Oh, Elspeth, thank you
Uh,
so much for being here. This is so
oh, it was
fun to
so
be in
good.
conversation with you.
Really good. Yay. I loved it.
Yes. Me too,
Thank
me
you.
too. And Elspeth's book is The Well of Truth: Stories of Spirit. So sometimes for those of you who are watching, my camera goes wonky when I put things up that's not my face. So if I go blurry, but here you go. And if those of you who, I will put this in the show notes as well. Those of you who are listening, you can always watch these episodes on YouTube too. If you just want to see what Elspeth and I look like, you can tune in there too. So um, thank you to all of you for listening. As always, it's a pleasure to share these conversations with you. If you like the show, do me a favor, leave it a review. Um, you can even get a stars. You don't have, you even have to write anything if you don't want to. Subscribe, tell your buddies about it. You can do all those things. Thank you again, Elspeth, for being here.
Thank you. Have a
Yes,
wonderful rest of your
I
day.
will. And to yes, to all of you, be well. And until next time, take good care.
Right.